For among you is the unbeliever and the believer. This also refers to the fact that there's the one who's the unbeliever in Allah and his creation. And there's the one who's the believer in Allah and his creation. It's said by Az-Zajjaj. Now, the kufr in the creation refers to people who are materialists and naturalists. But whatever's mentioned after this, we've already discussed. Close quote. Now, materialists are those who believe that only the observable material world exists. These are called materialists. Only the observable material world exists. The difficulty with this doctrine was that before they found out about electron microscopy, they believed that cells were just these watery, lily pad looking objects inside of the human body. Then they had to adjust that once they found out that actually no, the complexity inside one human cell is the equivalent of all of what's going on in New York City in just one cell, in terms of the traffic and the complexities and the pathways. So they had to adjust it. Not the materialists. Now, when you talk about materialists, you have to first of all talk about materialism. Materialism in general is the study of the observable world around you to try to ascertain where you came from and the origin of the world. So, materialism, you study the material world around you, everything that you see, in order to try to find out, where did I come from? And where did all of this come from? Now, that's not harmful in and of itself, because a materialist principle is for the most part used by scientists, because you have to study the observable world. Science is to come to conclusions on the observable world based upon studied principles that can be replicated. That's what this is. That's what science is. So there should be no Muslim that has a problem with science, because it's coming to conclusions based upon observable data that can be replicated. So you have your process. You have your observation. Then once you have your observation, you have your hypothesis. So your hypothesis is now, well, wait a minute, I've noticed that when I throw objects off of this building, they fall at this rate. So your hypothesis is, I believe there is a force pulling them down. Now, at the hypothesis stage, you have to do a whole lot of testing. And that testing, it then becomes a theory after testing. You have to run more tests, though. Because now theory in the scientific sense, the word theory itself, that's a technical word. That means something's in the staging process. It's being checked, it's being examined, it's being looked after, it's undergoing further scrutiny. And then once it's been replicated and established enough to where you can explain how the phenomenon is happening, it becomes an established fact. And we start to use words like gravity and things like this, because things become established facts. But they have to go through the observation, hypothesis, theory, the scientific models, and the testing, and then they become a fact. Right? That's not a problem. No Muslim, from what I can see, and from what we see, we're sitting here in this room, we're moderately intelligent, no one should have a problem with this. The problem comes with another type of materialism, which is philosophical and has a religious bent to it. This is called dialectical materialism. Dialectical materialism is that all there is the material world. And then you insert that. Now, dialectical materialism is it is evangelical atheism. That The material world proves there is no God. This is dialectical materialism. The material world proves there's no God. There's nothing after this. This is all there is. And then you insert that into science. Science, by nature, is not used to prove or disprove the existence of any of those things. Science is observation of the visible world. So you don't use science to prove the Quran or Allah. You don't use science for that. Science isn't used for that. It's not used to disprove or to prove. Science has its own separate category of what it's used for. Because science and knowledge are two different things. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Materialists make no difference between science and knowledge. For Muslims, we make a distinction between science and knowledge. And you may care to note this down. Why is this important? Okay. Science, again, is conclusions made based upon observable data. Then we have our theory, our hypothesis, and then testing, right? That is science. And science is acquired through observation and testing. Knowledge has many different levels. Science and knowledge are two different things. When we say knowledge when we say science in the revealed law, and when we say knowledge, we have different things in mind. Okay. Knowledge in the revealed law is ilm. Ilm. Now, we gain ilm through the following things. We gain ilm through the following things. The five senses: tasting, touching, smelling, hearing, seeing. Five senses. That's one place we get ilm from. Ilm. The second place we get knowledge from, where we get ilm from, is through mass transmitted reports. Mass transmitted reports of previous nations or peoples and or their histories. Mass transmitted reports. So we're talking about not one person said it, a whole bunch of people said it. For example, the existence of Japanese people. That's mass transmitted. We can go to Japan, we can fly there, we can meet Japanese people. This is mass transmitted information. Right? It's impossible to fake this. Right? Within that is observing things around you. Within that is observing things around you. Which is known as acquired knowledge. Acquired knowledge comes through observing things, and this leads to knowledge, but it's not the only source. Right? The third type of ilm is revelation. Revelation. Now, revelation has to be compared with other revelation to reconcile points that might seem contradictory. But the other types of ilm have to be ran through rigorous testing. So your five senses, what you hear, see, taste, touch, smell, has to be run through rigorous testing. So when someone says, and an example that happened when we got into a discussion, one of my teachers got into a discussion with a materialist. And the materialist said, well, I don't trust anything that I can't taste, touch, smell, or see. He's like, wait a minute, hold on then. Do you eat lemons? Have you eaten lemons? Yes, I have. No, you haven't. What are you talking about? Well, listen. When you've cut the lemon and you've touched it to your tongue, before you've had a chance to do anything, the sensors on your tongue, because you have 3 sensors on your tongue, sour, sweet, and savory. The sensors on your tongue have sent interpretive data to your brain to tell you what the lemon tastes like. So you're not directly tasting the lemon. It's happening through the process of interpretation. So you're not even tasting a lemon. Now, do you still want to argue that the visible world is all there is? So then the next issue came, well, the brain is this electric piece of equipment. These electromagnetic waves going through the brain, all this other stuff's happening. Where's the source of where that's coming from? And why is it that when people die, sometimes the meters that are measuring it still pick up waves, even when they're flatlined and dead? What is this? That's showing you that the dialectical materialism is not the only way. Right. He also mentions the naturalists. Naturalists are another body of people. Okay? Naturalists. Naturalists believe that man's origins are primitive. And that man needs to return to those primitive origins. Because through the process of civilization, man has gone further from his links. So man needs to return as a naturalist. Because man is part of nature. Why are we talking about human beings and animals as if we're these separate things when we're an organism just like they are? We're just as much as part of them as they are of us. This leads to another theory, which is known as primitivism. That man's best hope for survival and thriving is to move back into a primitive state. That the world you see around you is not what it is at all. So these people reject the visible world around them in terms of the way that things are set up. And they believe that we have to go back to this original primitive system. The materialists reject the visible world around them in the sense that they don't include the angels and everything else, which are also part of Allah's creation. So they say, okay, what I see, I believe, but what I don't see, I don't believe. So they are rejecting creation still. Because they're only saying, well, the things I can see. So then we have to start saying, well, wait a minute. What about neutrinos? You can't see those. But then they make exceptions. Well, that's different. That's science. But you can't say, because previous to that time, before electron microscopy, you wouldn't have seen those things. So you would have denied them. So we have to establish a constant hermeneutic here. And that's why this issue comes up again and again. Materialism is existing among Muslims in the Anglosphere because obviously if they've been sent to the schools here, or even if they've been sent to Muslim schools, they will have at least been partially exposed to materialism, dialectical materialism. The dangerous part about it is that it's so surreptitious because you don't realize it's going on until you come out with statements that are flat out kufr. But fortunately, you're not held accountable for those because you don't know that you're saying it and you don't believe it at the time. You're just saying what you've been given to regurgitate. Right? Just like little kids just regurgitate sometimes swear words because they know that it gets a reaction and it's meant to be bad, although they don't understand the meaning of it. Right? The same thing. So naturalism and dialectical materialism are related to each other because they have issues with the world around them and the rest of the creation of Allah. Now, the Imam